for the state, so that's,
Here we go. Okay. Did it unmute itself?
No, she didn't. I did.
Yeah.
I did it.
I'm calling the meeting to order at 6 o'clock. My name's Carl Bissix. I'm the chair. We are working on mostly budget items tonight. And we have East Montpelier with us to talk about our service contract. I see they put you on the close to the top of the agenda, so you don't have to hang around too long. Any changes to the agenda for the board recommend?
I got a small something to discuss the bridge safety, the Mill Street Bridge.
Yeah.
There've been public safety comments coming in. I discussed it with hazard mitigation and have some ideas and just want to run it by the select board.
Okay. Can we do that toward the end?
Sure,
Yeah,
no rush.
Okay. Announcements, I guess I wanna announce to the public that we've had some illnesses in the town office that have hampered our ability to do activities. We are gonna change the hours temporarily for from 8 to 4 on Monday and Friday only. This will be the open to public hours. We will, but people can call and make appointments if they wish to come in at different times. We are also, just to remind everybody, we're scheduled for our town meeting on March 4th. There's a lot of work still to do, and the primary thing is getting auditors to review the accounting, and we only have one auditor. So anyone out there interested in being an auditor, please let us know. And also the town office is looking for an employee to help with the clerk and assistant clerk. So
I have a question,
you have a question?
about the auditor position.
Yes.
Is there like a job description listed somewhere? I don't think I saw that come through that I
It's-
can share to somebody
It's
else.
on the front page of the town website.
Thank you.
Yep.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for that. So that position is, as is the position for the assistant clerk description. Yes,
I would just say, Karen Jones, the auditor, the current auditor.
Yes.
Replied to my email and she seems to be saying that things are proceeding appropriately.
Oh, that's
At this
good.
point in time, so.
Okay.
I will,
We still would like to have another one or two.
Yeah.
yeah, I ended up doing the auditing solo last year
Yeah,
as well, so.
yeah, we need, I mean, it's just good practice to have more than one auditor. And I just want to remind people, we have the village expansion public information meetings coming up on the 9th and 12th. And they're being noticed through Front Porch Forum and Facebook, I believe. They'll be here, and this is a chance to ask questions and to learn what the group, the volunteer group that's been working on this knows. So it'd be a good way to really come up to speed on what's happening there and what they'd like to do. That's all my announcements. You have an announcement?
I got one, a celebration. This morning, I was thrilled out my window to see the sidewalk plowing tractor for the first time
Yes.
going down Main Street. I want to thank the road commissioner and the road foreman who I saw behind the wheel for plowing the sidewalks in Plainfield.
Yeah,
Thank you, Josh. Thank you, Mike.
yes, thank you. Anything else? Okay, public comment, any public comment? We have some public here. I don't see any hands up. Okay, let's go right to it. Discuss and act on East Montpelier's ambulance service contract. You have been here before to talk about this, and we appreciate you coming back in. I think the big change we'd like to see, if it's doable, is a 1-year contract instead of 3. I don't know if you got that word, but I think that was shared, but, that's what we'd like to play out.
Before you all start, if you would just all state your names, please, that would be helpful.
Albert Petrello, I'm the chief of East Montpelier Fire.
Okay,
I'm Sandy Conti. I'm a board member.
And Jay Copping, president,
Jay or Jake?
J-A-Y.
so what questions do we have for these folks other than the idea of having a 1 year instead of a 3 year, just because of the length of the time? We'd like to have an option to look at it again, honestly, in a year.
We could get the word on it, and I think we've historically been 3 years, and I think, it was 3 years. With a 1 year notice if either one of us are going to move on to something else. So is there a thought why you want to move to a 1 year versus the 3 year?
Say again what you just said, so that we normally have had a 3 year with a
Right.
1 year ability to.
Yeah, with a 1 year, remembering it right, 1 year advance notice if either party is going to say, we need to do something different.
Okay,
So, it's historically worked well for us and our budget stuff. I think one of the things, and Elric can speak more to it, if we go to, if we stay with a 3 year, we could always come back every year and review the budget, something like that. If we do just a 1 year contract, then we would need to have. Typically it's a year's advance notice, if we're gonna stop it, so. That we need to kind of iron that piece out, and have more on that.
well, if you count on 3 year budget and it turns out to be 2, then that changes what you're planning. to
That's it, I mean, when we look at, we're all doing budgets at this point in time, or have already done our budgets, we've already done ours and put it to the towns and whatnot, so. It's a tough time to change that.
Yeah.
As far as the terms of contract in a year or 3 years and whatever. And that's potentially doable, I don't know what you guys have for thoughts on it.
So my thoughts are that it puts us behind the 8 ball with, I know we've got to give you a contract for July 1st, but we have to give the town a budget and everything by December. So the time frame puts us in a bind to the spacing. We'd have to know, like, in October, whether you're gonna have a contract with us again. Because we have to work the numbers to put you into another contract for December to give to East Montpelier and Callis, who we supply our budget to. And it sort of puts us in a bind on such a tight time frame. So that's why we usually like to see a 3 year contract.
Okay, yep, and I understand, we have the same issue with staggered,
Yeah, because this budget, if passes or goes through, I know it doesn't start until July, so there's a big gap there, so we lose time on, planning the next year, and then it's a vicious cycle.
Yeah, and I know costs are up, I mean, we appreciate what you do, and so. I hadn't heard about the year notification, that might make some folks feel better.
Can you, and I know you all did this, I think in October, but there's raises every year within the 3 years, and just the rationale behind it, because I feel like when we asked in October. If our rate was being based on the number of people that were in town per capita, which would mean we would be like a lot less than Marshfield, or whether it was based on call outs, and if it's call outs. Because I know we got a list of call outs and some of them are Plainfield Post Office, but they're not Plainfield Town.
No, it has nothing to do with the number of calls or location of call. It's a per capita base. We have a pool of numbers of people that we cover in our budget, and take the budget and divide by the number of people that we cover. And that comes out with the per capita yearly cost per person per town. And right now it's up around 75, 77 per year per person. And we're well below it to offer you this contract at 56, I think, the first year, 65 the second year. I don't know, the third year, we can discuss the numbers. but
Yeah,
that's-
I see the principle though. Do you have a question?
No, I think, Dan, are you complete?
Oh, well, so, and just that, the total budget piece, is that including capital expenses and things like that, like the trucks and all that, or is it just the service?
Yeah,
cost?
strictly only the money operational costs.
Yeah, okay,
So, you know, we have two revenue streams. We have the revenue stream of what the ambulance brings in from billing insurance companies.
hmm
And then we have the money that the towns provide us. And the money that the ambulance brings in as insurance revenue, that goes into capital, which helps buy the cots, the lifting,
the landlord.
new ambulance, fire trucks, or whatever
Sure.
else.
okay,
Thank you.
You know, and for us, it's the stability of knowing for the next 2 years that we have that set amount of money coming in.
yeah,
So we develop a budget and we know we're gonna get this, well, at least we hope. Taxpayers could always say no.
Yeah.
But, you know, and so it makes us feel better knowing, not every year wondering, as we develop our budget and present our numbers to the town of East Montpelier and Calais, to say, well, we don't know if we're gonna get the money we think from Plainfield.
yeah, yeah, it makes it difficult, I'm
And
sure.
that becomes hard. Right? And if there's issues that you have, you know, please convey them, or concerns, comments regarding the budget,
Mhm.
with our board. And, you know, if,
Even within the 3 year or whatever envelope, doesn't have to wait until a year, out to say, hey, we're concerned about something, or we've got a question about something.
Yeah,
And it's an open door over there, so that's.
well, our fire department seems to have a good relationship with you, and I'm sure if there's an issue that comes up, we could just be talking to you, so it's not some surprise somewhere.
Right.
But, okay. Any other questions from?
Well, going back to Dan's question about, call outs and stuff, I think our fire chief, at an earlier meeting, made a statement about, we're supposed to get a report from you as to like where the call outs have been and stuff, and I'm not sure he was satisfied with that report, if I'm remembering correctly.
yeah, I
Medical.
I actually was gonna turn it in tonight to you folks.
There you go.
Yes.
I've updated it. And there again, it's subject to minor errors here or there, but that is the past 3 years for Plainfield only, the type of calls, and we break it down by, six categories basically. And then I think the first year, either we didn't do any, or they weren't tracked, but whatever. We do fire assisting medical, so if like the fire department shows up to help our ambulance. And then fire going to a motor vehicle accident. So rarely for you guys, those would be very low or almost zero numbers, except for fire. And we do come into Plainfield from mutual aid. And then the other side is medical, where it's a medical call, it's a medical helping the Plainfield Fire Department, or medical for a motor vehicle accident. And those are the three calls, or the way they're broken down. And then we track whether we transport or not. So you can see for all the calls, if we transported 50 times, then that means on those 50 calls, we did get money coming in from insurance if they paid.
Right.
But if you see like 40 calls that were no transports, that means our crew came out to Plainfield, did whatever we did, we didn't transport, we don't get any money for that. So that's like a loss, in a sense. Every time we go to a call, it doesn't matter whether it's East Montpelier, Calais, Marshfield, Plainfield. If we don't transport that person, we don't get paid for it. Now, they changed the law I think this year, we're gonna start to see a small amount of money that we can build for no transports, because the ambulance agencies, we give up a lot of time to go there, and because we didn't transport yet, we don't get nothing for it.
Yeah,
An hour and a half of our time gone, and no income coming in. And so they did change that, so we will see some money coming in for that.
is that from the insurance companies, you
Right,
think? Yeah,
sure.
yeah.
If anybody-
Oh, sorry.
So that's not from the town. When you say this is Plainfield only, are you going?
Numbers are, the rule is for statewide, for no transports.
No, I'm not talking about that. I'm just talking about
Those are Plainfield numbers.
Plainfield numbers within the boundaries of Plainfield, not Plainfield mailing address.
Right.
Right.
We basically, when we get dispatched and the dispatcher says. East Montpelier ambulance respond to Plainfield, such and such an address. That's how the call gets logged in. Now, do I look at a map and look at the boundary and verify that that call was actually in Plainfield? No. I base it on what the dispatch based on 911 address location.
So 911 address, like Maple Hill.
Yeah.
Okay, bottom Maple Hill is Marshfield. Everything on Maple Hill is there.
Right.
Everyone there has a Plainfield address. And probably the call went to the Plainfield Fire Station or went to 911. They said, go to Plainfield.
Yeah.
You may think you're going to Plainfield, but you're going to Marshfield. So,
It's all about done off the 911 mapping, so if it's mapping out as Plainfield, it's Plainfield, if it's mapped out as Marshfield, they should know what those boundaries are, would be my
Mhm.
expectation.
And so is the per capita based on our town population or based on the population within the 911 map?
Your town.
Our town population. And Marshfield is a client, a customer of yours as well.
Yeah.
Yes. And, yeah. I mean, my hesitation here is that, Jonathan Matthews, the fire chief, Jonathan Matthews,
Yeah,
this evening had suggested that we do this one-year contract. It was his suggestion, and so, I am concerned about doing a 3-year contract, and we're getting that advice from the most knowledgeable person we have in town to tell us what we should be doing. And I understand, I think his thinking was, he's new as the fire chief, and he also had conversations with Barry Town Fire, and there was some thought that while they couldn't add us on this year, they may be able to add us on next year because they're onboarding Williamstown this year. And so there was some conversations because I guess the certification level of some of their people is higher and the costs are about the same for a higher certification. I know not enough about this, but this is what Jonathan was explaining to us in the past.
well, the only thing to consider too, though, for that, and we'll just put that out there, is the response time. Chances are, Perry Town's not gonna park an ambulance somewhere near here. So it's gonna come from Berrytown and or Berlin or Williamstown. And that's the commute to get to Plainfield versus half a mile up the road. And that's just something for you guys to consider. It's,
Mhm.
you know, I'm not saying you gotta go with us and you can't go with Berrytown. You can go with Berrytown, but just consider the potential response times. Where they're located is on the other side, Berry and that area, so they can more easily serve Orange than they can Plainfield, Marshall. And
Yeah.
that. I'm not saying they don't come out, we've had some calls where we needed 2 and 3 ambulances. And we call them Marsh, Berrytown and Montpelier to come help us,
Mhm.
it's just the way it happens.
It sometimes plays out where we do intercepts, where we meet them somewhere besides here because of that travel time. So
Mm.
it's, there are a number of factors that play into it, and I think for any of the towns, Berry City, Berrytown, EMS included, budget wise, Berrytown is stretched out, I can't really speak to them, it's hard to know what's gonna come down the pike for anybody. In terms of what they can cover, will cover, or pick up.
Yeah. Well, we all know that time is of the essence.
but what is the amount that we're paying you for the current year?
$58,596.
All right, and so we're talking about I'm looking at the 3-year draft here. Next year would go to 67 and change. The following year to 77 and change, and the following year to 89 and change, correct?
Yeah.
And I think it had been at a level number for a number of years
Mhm.
prior to this. and that's-
Yeah, I remember when you came here in October, you described that we were getting a pretty good rate.
I mean, I guess I'm
It seems like,
hesitant.
it seems like everybody's realizing they need to adjust all these costs all at once while we're
Yeah.
dealing with a lot of other costs that we're not used to.
Yeah,
so.
I mean, I,
Anything,
Yeah.
not just on any of us.
Yeah, no, of course.
I really appreciate what Dan said about, Jonathan not being here. I also, am hearing,
And we're not.
About-
looking-
the desire for some predictability and the timing issue, which I think would lead me to suggest a compromise of a 2-year contract at this point. And
I would just say, because of the 1-year opt-out clause. In effect, as long as between now and next October. We make the decision whether to stay with them or not, it's basically a 2-year contract anyway.
yeah,
So I would just say, like, let's,
that's a good point.
and then we just need to talk with Jonathan and just make sure that we're. Creating a process to be in a better place, figuring this out by October.
The contract does go July, June.
I just meant you were talking about the budget process piece.
Right.
I know we'd have more time than that, but if we were gonna get out of it, we would wanna make sure we give you plenty of time to know that we're doing it, and we would have to, from our budget perspective, start looking at it. So anyway, I realize we could probably do it even later than that, but
I'm seeing that our treasurer is actually sitting here. Do you have comment on this, Josh?
What was that?
Josh is
Our
behind you.
treasurer,
That's our
Josh
contract.
is behind you.
No. That sounds fine. I think the reality is that costs of all of our things have gone up drastically, and that level funding has been, a problem for a host of reasons, and I don't think that the the increases in this contract over the 3 years from current year, would be a 52% increase over the current year in the fourth, what would be the third year of the contract in the fourth year beyond the current, so that's a pretty steep increase, but I think that it's making up for a lot of lost time, but so. I think if there's a clause, as like I said. We're just. We're at a moment where things are getting very costly, and. We have to kind of explore the options, but. We have that out in 2027 or.
I think we would-
Set fiscal year, and
yeah, so by July 1st, 2026, we would have to let them know that we were leaving in a year,
yeah.
right?
I kind of had the same feeling oh, yes, sir.
And the other thing too is that, not that we're looking for an answer from you tonight on this, but, we are also willing to work with you if you come up with some different proposals, if you want to say, well, look, we like the contract, but man, that third year, that's another big increase. Can we meet you in the middle? Can we do something different? We're willing to work with you folks
Okay,
and
well, we appreciate that,
consider it.
and,
It's
and
not
I,
Let's get another flood.
that those numbers.
yeah, please, July 10th, no. So I think we need to talk to our fire chief.
Yeah.
But having you say that, that's good to know, and I was kind of feeling like Dan was, if we have. Essentially an out, if we, halfway through the term of this contract, we decided to give you. Warning that we didn't want to have the third year, it sounds like. That gives us some of what we wanted, which was a little predictability for us.
But truthfully, we do want to continue to work.
Yeah,
So, you know,
and we,
you look at
you,
numbers, you know, obviously, you know, you come to me and say, well, can you do the last year for nothing? No, I can't, but you know where you wanna be, you know where you can be, and we wanna work with you. We're not
Right.
trying to close the door on you and say, hey, well, if you're not gonna give us that amount of money, see you later. But
Yeah.
find a new service. We
Well,
don't wanna
well-
be that way either.
Yeah, I don't think it's the, you know. The expected cost increases that happen year to year, I think it's this catch up piece where you're trying to catch us up. To where we've maybe have supposed to been, and that it makes it a much bigger amount.
and it's a tougher year for us to do
Yeah.
this kind of thing.
Agreed.
So,
Yeah.
just remember that.
So a point of interest on this is exactly what he said on. Your contract has been only going up at a rate of about 3%. And sometimes it was frozen in 3% and. When our contract was going up at like 5 or 7%, I mean, our budget was. And
Okay.
for our budget to be going up at 7%, you were falling behind.
Mhm.
Because you were only, you were starting at such a low cost. I don't know what the previous administration did, but we got you in the door. And I think it might have been a little bit on the lower side
Mhm.
of what we should have. And now you're much further, and we're trying to play a little bit of catch up here. And not really cut your throats and say, we gotta have that much money. But that's where the situation has brought us.
You're trying to bring it to what you're seeing as reality.
Yes.
Yeah, and in line with other towns and
Yeah.
agencies across the
Yeah.
state.
Mhm,
I think we can do it for what Berry Town does it or lower, but
mhm.
yeah, or lower.
And you are closer
And we're.
for
closer.
much of our town, yeah.
Yes.
So
What do you think
do
we should?
do we take action tonight? Do we?
I think there was want to speak with our fire chief.
Okay, so, but to put it in our budget, we'll have to take action next Monday,
Yes,
to put it in our town budget.
Yeah, I mean, I think
So-
a 1 week is enough time to.
Yeah,
speak.
yeah, no, I'm just saying, it'll just have, it just has to, we just have to make a decision,
Okay,
and I feel funny making a decision without our fire chief.
yeah.
Well, that's fine.
If you. So,
Do we wanna have one of us as a select board member reach out to Jonathan, just so that we don't just say we wanna hear from him, but actually get his take on this?
yeah, I can call, I'll call him.
And then you can just have when you're a select board, reach out to Albert or myself or Paul.
Yeah,
I
we've
mean,
been using
I mean,
Paul.
Jonathan made no expectation about us doing anything except East Montpelier for the coming year.
Yes,
So I think we have the budget number for the coming year, no matter what.
well, if
that's. a fair
they
point.
accept a one-year
That's a fair
contract,
point.
Yeah,
I haven't heard them say they're willing to do a one-year contract.
no,
No, even if we,
The number would be the same.
number would be the same if we did 1, 2, or 3.
That's true, but if we're pushing for a one-year contract and they say no to that, then there's no number because we don't have a service.
let me talk to Jonathan and advise you folks on what he's thinking. I'm sure he knows about this notification clause in the contract, but I'll make sure he's aware of that. And that to me kind of eases the third year hit. So I will take the action to call Jonathan. I don't think there's any action for the board tonight. Thank you very much for coming in.
Thanks for having.
Thank you.
Thank you,
We appreciate what you're doing.
indeed.
And hope the rest of your evening is quiet.
Thank you. Good night.
All right, take it easy.
Bye.
Okay. You're next. Central Vermont Economic Development Corporation update, Melissa Bounty. Hello.
Executive Director of Central Vermont Economic Development Corporation. Historically, we've had a $300 annual line item budget with the town of Plainfield. We support 22 municipalities in Central Vermont with economic development resources. And historically, I've come into the January select board meeting to present on what I did in the last year. We received the $300 that Plainfield typically allocates from a private individual by donation. with the caveat that I still come in and present to you on what we did last year. So that's what I'm here to do, and also answer any questions, about what we do and what you all have for the year ahead, because it is such a big year for you.
Yes, well, can you explain some of the things you've taken on, just in a nutshell for us?
So, last year in Plainfield, we assisted 3 businesses directly, long-term with over several meetings. 2 were primarily flood related and 1 was related to a business location move. I don't usually list who the businesses are, but you can probably figure out.
Yeah.
We also facilitated the Capital for a Day visit, which was here. That was the follow-up to it's the governor's cabinet annual visit. So last year, the previous year, it had been called the ARPA tour, and they came out, and then they came out this year as well in the summer. And we facilitated 4 visits from federal delegation from the different senators and congresswomen coming out. So we organize those types of visits. I always attend and walk around. I work very closely with Graham on setting those things up.
Yeah.
And then I work with the business owners in a more confidential counseling kind of capacity to talk through their finances, strategic decisions, and we provided, as I mentioned, that support to 3 businesses in Plainfield last year. So it was, for us, a relatively busy year within Plainfield. We also helped Karen have to put together the regional project priority proposal, which that's a program that we run for the state of Vermont every year, where we create a list. My organization, along with the Regional Planning Commission, we form a committee and rank everyone who submits a project that will need funding in the next year. Those projects get ranked from 1 to 10, and that regional project priority list is published. It's used by certain funding programs as a scoring criteria. So that Plainfield flood recovery project did score on that list.
Yeah.
But I will be following up. It was tough to get that application and Karen worked really hard on it, did a great job. But now I'll be working with her directly to finesse that fairly rushed proposal. I do have feedback for her from the voting committee that worked on it, on the specific areas that I think need more strength, so that the written project as it is will be competitive as funding is sought after. And I also wanted to make sure Plainfield knows that my office is available as they look for funding all over the place for what's ahead. So we primarily support businesses, but housing does come under our umbrella in some types of situations, and definitely I'm working with Arian closely too on how the Heartbreak Hotel will unfold as a cost and a project. So that's what I do in a nutshell.
Do you do all this by yourself? Or
Yeah,
do
just me.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's a lot.
Yeah. Funding, my organization's primary funding is from the state of Vermont through the Agency of Commerce and Community Development. So the whole breadth of that team is is also readily available to my office for support, and definitely being that we are co-located in the same building in National Life, it's fairly easy for me to go grab somebody and ask a question. So I'm a good liaison, and also can help be a liaison for state and federal resources. And we do expect there to be quite a few to-do items for accessing funding coming up over the next 3, 4, 5 months. So I'll be working closely with Graham and Karen and Arian to make sure that they don't miss deadlines for those funding opportunities.
Well, that sounds great. I mean, it sounds like a lot for $300.
It's a real deal. $0. So.
And it sounds like you are helping with future planning. I mean, that's your kind of the main thing, and knowing what's been done elsewhere and having connections seems helpful. I mean,
We facilitate a bunch of stuff
Oh.
with Goddard too.
Yeah.
So we, Pat Mullen kind of led the charge on that conversation. She's a state employee who's the flood czar or something.
Yeah, she is the flood czar.
Yeah, and so she set up a lot of that, but we participate in that too, and we helped, oh, and the fourth, I didn't remember this properly, the radio station, I helped a
Oh,
lot.
got it, yeah,
And
GTI.
we got them in touch with the developer at Goddard to get they're very worried about their antenna and the regulations that they have to follow, and we helped that conversation be successful, so.
That's fantastic. Well, you have a question?
You mentioned, private donation that covered you for this year. What about for the budget year that we're looking at? Begins July
That's what I mean. If you had approved me for, the.
So you're
last
not
year,
asking for money for the
I'm
next
not
budget?
asking for money this year, and
Thank you.
instead of asking for money, I'm here to. That is the year, we've already received that $300 that we would normally come in to ask for right now and ask you to put on your next budget. So that's the $300 that's, you don't have to worry about. And then I'll come in next year and ask you for $300 for that subsequent year.
Well, sounds great. I mean, I knew about what you were doing, but I didn't know quite all the details. It's quite a lot.
I think I just want to speak aloud that, the transition coming soon to the co-op that we don't yet know about. But I'm just like flagging, like, let's make sure to loop you into whatever becomes of the co-op
Yeah, there
in the
was
village.
an interesting query that I have researched a little bit, and I sent it over to Graham, but it should probably go to a larger body about people in Plainfield who will now need rides to get to the new co-op location. So there is a service through Capstone called Gopher. Yeah, and I wanted to make sure that that information got to Plainfield, because I was particularly concerned about people having access, who don't drive, having access to fresh fruit and vegetables when the co-op formally moves. And, that need is on Capstone Gopher's radar. So they had offered to set up a regular route if that was needed.
Oh, wow.
But as whoever the right person is at Town of Plainfield, that might be dealing with that concern. Capstone's aware of it and ready to remedy it at no cost to the town or the people who need the rides.
That's beautiful. There are a fair number of carless residents of Plainfield Village.
That were used to
Yeah.
getting their fresh fruit and vegetables at that store, I'm sure,
Mhm.
so.
Mhm.
Are you in touch with Janine Wild, the new general manager?
No,
Okay,
I worked with,
but we can make her aware of Gopher.
great, she can loop in with me, or she can, loop in directly with
Yeah.
Capstone,
Yeah,
Michael Billingsley, I have a question about the building that the co-op has been located in. Would you be involved, or would you be available to be involved with the, finding of a purchaser and perhaps the, provision of services that might be connected with that new owner?
absolutely. So site selection is a big part of what I do. We advertise available properties on my website, and I probably received 3 or 4 site selection requests in a week, from people that want to move a business, and are looking for a site. So having that building on my list would be a good step. And then I can also sort of personally work on that building, getting the word out and looking for a good solution for a tenant or owner of it.
Yeah, I mean, Peter, you had a question publicly about that about a week ago, about potential buyers for the.
Well, I posted a piece on our front porch forum, but the board of the co-op had put out a request. I think also on front porch forum, at least on Facebook page, I don't know where else. Basically soliciting, ideas for that space. The space isn't listed for sale yet,
Okay.
they're hoping as an interim step that someone steps forward before they get to that point, but I think that point is rapidly approaching, so.
So, it can be added to our website for public view once it's ready and listed for sale, and that can be done even in a soft way. Sometimes I get listings from people that are just trying out a listing. I could also connect you with commercial realtor or connect the co-op board with commercial realtors. Or we could keep it more low key and within the region, and I can just be aware of it and refer people to that opportunity.
I have a follow-up question.
Yes.
Which is, if the co-op were to, instead of selling it, lease it to an organization, particularly a nonprofit, they're looking at the possibility that because this was originally a Grange building, that there might be some guidance from the original handing it over to the co-op that would say certain kinds of uses were appropriate and certain kinds were not. And if it were somebody wanting to lease it, could you also get involved?
Yep, no difference to me whether the opportunity is a lease or a buy, so
Okay.
I can help in the same way, and I can also point them to, I work often with the, Small Business Law Center, I think it's called, through the Vermont Law School.
Mhm.
So if there's legal questions, there's things they can and can't do, but they can generally give education on, some questions that come up for developing legal documents or understanding legal documents that deal with a building's intention and transfer.
Yeah, there's a high level of community stake in the use of that building, and it has. But nobody knows how to solve it, so I think it would be important to have another eye on it.
Yeah,
If you could, yeah, talk to the co-op management about what you could offer them, and they may really appreciate having that insight.
Yeah, Janine Walt, the general manager, Rose Paul is the president of the board.
I've dealt
Yes,
with this one time.
yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
you know, you should talk directly to her.
Yep,
Yeah, yeah. Well, thank you for coming in and offering that help and giving us a rundown of all the work you've done. We appreciate it. It's
great to
it's-
participate.
yeah,
I wish you a very good 2025.
yeah,
Thank you.
we're hoping
Thank you.
as well. Okay, we're all set, I guess. Here. Moving on, we have the Hazard Mitigation Committee Budget Review. Maggie, you wanna? That's you. You may wanna sit up here just because we have this machine watching you and listening.
Maggie Baird, Chair of the Housing Mitigation Committee for Plainfield. And we have a budget request for 2025. Last year, we had a budget of $1,024. And we ended up only using, I think, about 38 of it. And so one of our big projects was to do a spring forum, which the Hazard Mitigation Committee did pre-COVID. We're bringing it back. And so we have plans to have speakers on preparing for an emergency, specifically for people with disabilities or different concerns, different types of concerns like autism or medical equipment, or so we have a couple people already slated. And we have a couple people that may require stipends, which is where that line item comes from. And so those people would be like from like the Red Cross or another organization. And so we based our mileage usage for the spring forum off of their headquarters in Concord, New Hampshire, because that would be the farthest someone would be coming from. We're reimbursing mileage. There's also the possibility that some of the in-state people would be free as in no stipend, but we may have to reimburse mileage. So the stipend mileage is kind of a little flexible for line items. And then we would like to potentially purchase some more public resource materials, probably from Vermont Emergency Management directly, that are like booklets for preparing an emergency, your home for an emergency and stuff like that, which we've been handing out over the years, and we have depleted our stash. And so those things especially are very useful during an event like Old Home Days at our booth. And then the last thing we have is one of our ongoing projects is a feasibility study of the Batchelder Dam that we're working with Friends of the Winooski, and they have a contract with an engineering company right now that is going through and doing the feasibility study, and that will come to fruition, like it should be finalized in April of 2025. So we anticipate that there will be some sort of public information meeting in which we would need some specialty printing, particularly like large flood maps and stuff like that. towards the second half of the year, which is where the printing costs come in, and which is why we've also raised our budget a little bit, budget request a little bit. To accommodate those larger specialty printing.
Sure, no, I've understood. And that's all important.
So,
Uh,
any questions or?
And so this year you're requesting 1174, is that right?
No.
That's what you sent us.
That's what you sent us
Did it
today.
say 1174? I'm
Yeah.
so sorry. I went from 150 to 300. Yes, 1174.
Okay,
Correct.
And you said last year was 1124 and you spent $38. 1024, excuse me.
Yeah.
The $1,000 that wasn't spent, that's just like, that's not sitting in an account, right? That's just
It
like
is
still
not.
at the town.
It's still part of
Okay.
the town's budget.
I
yeah.
figured, but I was just.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was-
Yeah, we.
Well, yeah, I just,
We do reimbursements. We don't get the money upfront and then.
Can I ask
Got it.
Josh, Josh,
Yeah.
in your printout, you have them in as 875 last year. Is that a? I mean, it may be that there's
well,
another,
that might just
another
be-
line somewhere.
Yeah. You had them at 1100 this year, so you're only $74 off of what, they're actually asking for.
I mean, considering y'all spent. I don't even know what percentage $38 is of 1,100 last year, and that hazard mitigation is important. This thing, I'll say this feels good to me.
Yeah. I'm also comfortable with, I mean,
Yeah.
you've itemized it and shown us exactly what you want to do with it. Seems reasonable to me.
yeah, that's me too.
All right. Yeah, are there any questions?
And just so you know, Maggie, we haven't been voting on these as pieces. We're gonna vote them all
Yeah,
next week, so.
Yeah. Yeah, the main thing is to see if there's any questions or comments or questions you have of us.
Yeah, this is my first time coming in front of you. So.
Yeah. Not too scary, is it?
Michael did it last year, so this is all very new to me.
Well, any chance we get to hear from someone other than Michael is.
Well, and we're gonna hear from him next. And at our last meeting,
Unfortunately.
at our last meeting, we heard from Karen Hatcher, who presented, and I'm not gonna get the phrase right, but it had to do with stipends for, various.
Yes.
People who may be called in if there is another, emergency. And so I kind of, in my mind, wrap the emergency management, the hazard mitigation, and all of that together into one category, because it's all emergency response and planning.
That's
And-
actually not so though. And hazard mitigation is not involved with emergency response at all.
I don't want to argue the point, but,
Okay.
in some of it is preventive and some of it is response, and it's to emergencies. And, I have been doing a little bit of research into what other towns, spend on this and other cities spend on this, and I am frankly a little troubled by the size of what we're being asked here. And I'll just say that before we get into discussion, but Karen did put forth a very interesting concept, which is what the city of Montpelier basically does, which is to say, here's a structure that gets called when a emergency happens, and there's a response tree, and it involves people that you would expect, the city manager, the fire department, the police department, et cetera. And not all the towns and not all the cities call things the same things, and so you're sometimes comparing apples to oranges. But you can pretty much see what the scale is and stuff, so I just want to tell you my thinking, that I'm looking at a bigger picture here than just a single line item, so. Okay. And, I think there may be some, how to respond, people doing brochures and public tabling and all that kinds of things. And yeah, this brochure may be a little bit different than that, but it's all related. So anyway, I'll shut up now.
So are you saying that maybe the budget is too high, this budget item's too high, or?
I'm looking at all of these concepts together
Okay,
and then trying to see what other of our neighboring towns do in Vermont on the same subject.
yeah,
Um,
You may find it interesting, but the Montpelier Energy Committee, is that what they would call themselves?
Marshall?
No, the Montpelier Energy Committee that
Oh, yeah.
contacted us to actually discuss with us about turning into a hazard mitigation committee within the town or the city of Montpelier. So there
Mhm.
actually is a committee looking at switching over to doing.
I should,
explosive hours.
I should add that having a dedicated group to study hazard mitigation is unusual, meaning that there are less than a dozen towns in the state of Vermont that have had hazard mitigation, formal groups of one kind or another doing that. And ours is one of the longest lived in the sense that we started in 2011. Hazard mitigation is to look at the coming year, maybe the 2 years, but at a time frame that can be graspable about what risks are on the horizon and to alert the public with public education so they can be prepared for that. And that's a big part of what they've always done. It's very preventive. They don't and have no action actually in the context of an existing disaster. They don't do any work at all. And except if they chose individually to volunteer. The other distinction, and I possibly didn't do this in the right order, but I was preparing because we need a new emergency management director at some point. It's preparing a summary of what an emergency management department does. And if you use either the state or the federal criteria, it's a combination of hazard mitigation, emergency, not response, emergency response is what the fire department does. They're a response organization. Emergency management does disaster management. In other words, the disaster has already happened. People have been rescued or saved. And then what do you do with everybody? What do you do with the evacuees? What do you do with the people who have houses that need to be gutted out? It's all recovery related. And it starts immediately, whereas the state recovery process doesn't start until 2 months after the disaster has been declared. So they have a whole team for recovery. It's very different from emergency management. Emergency management on the state level works for the first 2 months, like full bore. And then at the end of 2 months, then the recovery operation, which is a whole different staff group, comes into play. And the third thing that emergency management does is, I guess you would call it community resettlement. So everything, I mean, I'm still doing work. I'm still working 20 hours a week compared to 70 hours a week I was the first 2 months or so. That's a lot of people who are still not in the home that they want to be in, or who are living temporarily in homes that are declared disaster. Like we have 7 households on Hudson and Mill, where 14 people are living in houses that are slated for buyout because they were so badly damaged. And their needs are still under my purview. I hear from them that if they have trouble getting a furnace, and we work very intensely. I did a lot of work last week and 2 weeks ago, rescuing some pets that had to be abandoned because the house that a temporary resettlement of Plainfield residents turned out to be kind of a disaster, and the animals were abandoned, and that became my work in Elizabeth Bignell's. So we know formally what our jobs are, and have a lot of volunteer staff under emergency management, as well as people that we intend to bring in, like the AmeriCorps person that I brought up last week. So when we get to the emergency management part of the budget, why it is the way it is, I want to also remind you that it is not a large amount of money compared to, and I will use this as a specific example, the budget in the roads department here for chains for last year was $10,000, of which 7,300 was expended. And again, they asked for 10,000 again this year. And our budget, my budget is 6,000 some plus a stipend, which hasn't been approved yet, but a stipend for emergency management, so I can attract someone to take my place. Health officer gets 4,000 a year for stipend, and an emergency management director should have gotten a stipend a long time ago, but it was never suggested. So in
Okay, well, let's,
all that, yeah.
okay, thanks for the background. Any other questions for Maggie before we go officially to Michael?
One of the ways I kind of think of hazard mitigation is similar to the conservation committee. It's looking out for nature and the
Yeah.
natural environment. Hazard mitigation is looking after people and structures. So that's kind of the way that I like to.
Yeah, that's
the
good,
distinction.
good visual. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, well, thanks,
Thank you,
Maggie.
Maggie.
Okay, so we're on to the emergency management budget review.
I'm gonna go back to the beginning of last year, actually, where we had our first one, and then, I mean, excuse me, not to 2023, where we had our first major flood. That particular flood, where I was emergency management director, we had 3 displaced households. Some temporary evacuees that were put up in kind of bad circumstances for overnight just because they couldn't stay in their homes along the Winooski River. What everything that followed that, which had to do with coordinating volunteers to help, that had to do with collaborating with other organizations like the Burlington Queen City Angels, who provided a lot of things like dehumidifiers and cleanup supplies, working with Salvation Army. All of that was done by myself personally, with after the 3rd week, volunteers helping distribute that, people like Mary and Alice Merrill and others who came over and helped coordinate where the supplies were that were going out the door. And at that time, it was probably about a 30 to 40 hour a week for me, and less so for all the volunteers. This year, I knew, given the scope and the scale of the damage, there were 125 families filed 211 claims, saying that they were damaged in some way that would require attention, and in some cases, they had to abandon their houses altogether. And then of those, 55 required direct interventions, finding a place to live, helping them. I was following every single household, every single individual in an apartment that had to be moved to somewhere else in relatively short order, and made sure everybody eventually got safely settled, as well as set up with Goddard the sheltering arrangement, for which actually we sheltered people for a total of 10 weeks, 2.5 months. The last people left that shelter on the 25th of September. So I was taking daily visits to that shelter, sorting out interventions. There were people with mental health crises there. There were people with addiction crises there. There were people that had to be fed. For the first 2 months, we fed them 3 meals a day, and I helped coordinate that. What was particularly helpful for me was that each major area that I had basically been handling myself and checking in it regularly to see if everything was working well was picked up by other people. So Dan and Mo, as an example, Dan Fingus and Mo, picked up all of the distribution of supplies and the logging in of volunteers. And I checked in with them daily, but I really didn't have to supervise what they were doing. Similarly, we had Dan Malind from Enough Ministries, who came in and handled all of the initial claims. He had tracking everything on the computer of every household that had asked for individual assistance from FEMA. And I asked the select board back then to appoint him as the interim individual assistance manager, and he did that. And then eventually Liz Bicknell and Grace Worcester volunteered to do that, and he could step in. Public assistance, all these areas that I either had oversight over or that I was directly involved with on a daily basis, eventually started to find volunteers to do. So I did waste management last year. This year it was Peter Young. And so my job became all about communicating, connecting, and finding resources. So my day usually started at 7:30 in the morning with first calls coming in, and then eventually I would be able to have enough quiet that I'd start doing email about 8 o'clock at night, and I might do email for 5 hours and writing reports, which would take me till 2 or 3 in the morning, and then I'd be up again at 7:30. So I did that for 28 days in a row. And then I collapsed and I asked for help, and that's when a lot of the people stepped up that now, like Karen Hatcher and others, who really took a big part of the administrative load off, but I still couldn't keep track of my own stuff. So I asked for assistance with administrative work. And Laura Brill and to some extent Denise Wheeler stepped forward to do that. And they had mounds of notes that I left with myself on scraps of paper and tried to turn it into databases. But I don't have, because of my own particular things, a real good way of dealing with a lot of information. So I was having a lot of information overload and trying not to melt down. And so given all that, there were several things that finally became clear after 3 months had passed or 4 months had passed, which is that first of all, I can't do this forever. Secondly, I need a replacement, but I can't attract a replacement without offering a stipend at least equal to what the town health officer gets. So the town officer gets 4,000, so it has 4,000 as a stipend for emergency management. There are 2 other positions which were never filled, one of which was a permanent administrative assistant because the people who had been volunteering had to peel off after about 3 or 4 weeks. And so that's where the AmeriCorps volunteer comes in. So that I'm interviewing candidates for that right now. And as you see in my budget, the $25,000 payment they receive is being offset by a $25,000 grant. So they're not a zero cost to the town, but they're very small cost to the town. AmeriCorps has asked that the $500 emergency fund be fed up on their behalf if they have a parental death or something where they have to do emergency travel. AmeriCorps has asked that we have a fund set aside so that they can deal with family emergencies or health emergencies. So that's the 500. And then because 2 of the candidates I have would have to, well, maybe all of them, would have to follow me around and be personally involved. It's a very hands-on position in addition to doing things like database management and website building and all that kind of thing. They would need to have mileage just like I need to have mileage. So my mileage figure hasn't changed at all. It was 780 for last year and 780 for this year, but I've added 500 for the AmeriCorps volunteer so that they could be reimbursed for their mileage. And the overall budget, the actual emergency managed budget was $2,800 this year, which is about half expended. And the rest of it is going to be expended before the end of the year because I'm still in the process, as Josh knows, of buying a dedicated computer, a dedicated phone. And I have a lot of printing and stuff that I haven't had done yet. We're doing signs. As you know, was able to get the parking lot paved in front of the town hall just in the nick of time in November. So it's available for town meeting day. But there are other signs up in the front of the building that I'm working through with Conservation Commission that not Conservation, excuse me, the Historic Preservation Trust, who put up the money for this building, in order to identify that our Emergency Operations Center and our shelter are here. Same kind of sign that you see in front of the town hall, so in the municipal building. So we're going to be paying for that. And I have also gotten a grant, as you know, of almost $30,000 to pay for all this stuff. So my actual budget for emergency management, compared apples to apples, which is last year and this year, has jumped from 2,800 to 6,000. So it's a little bit over double. But given that, I mean, you just heard from the Community Development Corporation, they serve 5 businesses. We serve 55 households, and the next disaster we may be serving again is many. I'm still working very hard in disaster prevention, which you'll be hearing more about, both in terms of widening the Great Brook above the Mill Street Bridge. I think it needs to be widened, and I'll be making a presentation about that. I get very deeply hands-on involved with all that stuff. And I'm probably about 3/4 through my mileage expenditure and that kind of thing. But looking ahead, I think for the degree of service and the amount of actual on the ground work that the community of Plainfield gets from emergency management and the kind of planning and troubleshooting that emergency management does, that this is a bargain basement price. In other words, I'm asking for 6,000 for all that. And then on top of that, a stipend, which hasn't been approved yet, which is the other part of the budget. So we're looking at a total of a little, I think it's exactly 11,000 for the whole works, which includes 3 people. Mayor Corr, yet to find an emergency management coordinator, who is the person who basically sit in the office in the EOC during a disaster. Very hard for me to be both places at once, to be out in the world and going through people's basements, and at the same time be fielding walk-ins at the Emergency Operations Center. So the EOC coordinator, and I had another talk with a person today who is a candidate for that, would be as essential for that part of the work as I would be for the other part of the work. And I will continue doing this. This is the last thing I'm going to say. I'm going to ask for reappointment in March. I'm going to ask for reappointment in March unless a substitute for myself comes forward. I thought one candidate in the fire department, and that may still be true, but the only way that's going to work is if I divide the job up a little bit and do more of the hazard mitigation side, which I mentioned I would be asking for appointment as hazard mitigation specialist for the town. I brought those skills when I moved here, and I will continue to do them. But emergency management is such a huge job in a town that's beset by disasters. If you have a mountaintop town without major watershed stuff like Underhill or something like that, emergency management budget won't be called on very much. But I know, and I think all of you know, that we are going to get whacked again, either in small ways or big ways, but it's not something we can escape. This problem is coming to us from outside the town boundaries. And we need to be ready, we need to have the personnel, and we need to, and by the way, I should say that the shelter is about ready for asking for certification. When in about 3 weeks, I'm going to have an orientation for all the people who volunteered and all the people who came, who might be available from the prior group of volunteers to come forward. Staff this with people who would be available either when we have to have it open as a cooling shelter, in other words, in very hot days in the summer, we have to have somebody here. Very cold days in the winter, if the electricity fails and people don't have any place to stay safe, they would come here for a warming center. And also during a disaster where it's an evacuation, emergency evacuation center, we have the cots here now. We have all the pillows and blankets here now. We have the first aid supplies here. And all of that has happened in the last few months and it's continuing. So this is an enormous job. It's as big as the fire chief in a different way. And it's got a very tiny budget compared to fire and rescue. And there's no reason it should be as big as fire and rescue, but I definitely do think that what we ask for is both appropriate and modest. So that's where I'll stop.
Thank you, Michael.
Quick question before.
Yes.
I talked to Bram this morning and mentioned your reimbursement for the computer stuff.
It's taken care of.
It's taken care of. Okay,
Yes, it is.
thank you.
Yeah, we're going to have it because we're using my own phone for everything for the last 2 years. Every call that it comes in has gone to my personal phone, and every piece of work that's done has been done on my personal computer, which is a little bit flaky. So with Josh's consent and help, we are having a dedicated computer and telephone for emergency management. That's part of the budget going forward.
Is that listed? Right now it's like telephone.
There is a
It says mobile phone,
account.
but is mobile phone, does that include computer?
Yeah, it does.
Okay, thank you.
There's
That was my
no
other question.
amortization because the computer is being actually bought with this year's budget. The computer, this year's budget is still not fully extended. So I'm going forward. The town will own the computer, And the account is set up for emergency management, the way the Apple Care will be set up, which is the warranty service on the computer, is also done for emergency management. So I'll just hand that whole thing off to my replacement.
Yeah, go ahead.
There was talk when Karen was here and you didn't address it just now, but so I'll ask, which is a reserve fund, shelter reserve fund
We haven't
expense.
got that yet. That's
It's the next item on the agenda.
Okay. But and I'm not sure she was talking about that specifically, but basically, having an emergency management reserve fund, and maybe that's not the wording she used, but that's the concept.
I
Where,
asked her not to use emergency management because it would look like my budget somehow.
Disaster Reserve Fund, I believe is what. it is.
disaster reserve fund, I mean, the concept being is that like, there are certain things that are ongoing capacity that you want to have built in. And then the reserve fund, the concept is that if an emergency happens, you know, there is money available to draw on to cover some of these things, so you don't have to rush around and, you know, find a grant, you know, that may not be there or whatever, so you can begin to address some things. And I guess I'm struggling with, you know, how much ongoing normal expense there needs to be in emergency management versus how much is response to emergency capacity that you need for that event. If you understand my concept.
Can I use Moortown as an example? Moortown, Stefan is the emergency management director there, is a town about our size, both in terms of a little bit higher population, but not too different. Moortown has an emergency management budget, has a hardworking emergency manager, and he needs expenses just like I need expenses. This is very realistic to an ongoing annual year budget. It's not. I'm asking for this help because this is the only way I could do it. If I can't have this kind of support, I can't do emergency management. I said in my cover letter, I'm not padding my budget at all. There's no fluff built in here. But, and I haven't completely bought into Karen's idea, and she knows that the idea of having a reserve fund to give a $10,000 stipend to emergency management, that kind of thing. I have no idea. I'm a little uncomfortable with it. It doesn't feel like the way to go. I mean, I don't know how you would fund it. I don't know how the voters would feel about it, and I don't know how it would necessarily be activated. Now, Moortown has a disaster reserve fund, however, which I think in their case is about $10,000. That is different than the shelter reserve fund. That the disaster reserve fund, as Stefan explained to me, is to buy things. If he has to buy 100 road cones to block off parts of the road or to create safety barriers, if he has to call in special vehicles to move people from one place to the next, if he has to rent stuff, all of this is disaster related. The money is there to do that. He doesn't have to wait for the next select board meeting. If the next select board meeting is 2 weeks off, he can draw from that fund to do disaster response.
And ideally, that would be covered through FEMA or whatever, but it would give him starting money, upfront
Like
money to deal
working
with.
capital.
Yeah.
Josh, you
Didn't
have a
include
question.
any staffing money. That's what's my
Right.
point. The reserve fund is really for out-of-pocket expenses that are disaster related. You can really itemize them and say what they are.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm willing to be an emergency management director in disaster or peacetime, if you will, for a stipend of $4,000. And I would say that Jody Velarde would say the same thing. It doesn't matter. She worked extra hard as our health officer during the disaster. She worked a lot. She was very available. And yet she wouldn't ask for more money for that. And neither would I. I think that's why I was uncomfortable with the idea of an increased stipend if there was a disaster. But I am comfortable with the idea of there being a disaster reserve fund that would provide emergency hardware, equipment, rentals, and all those kind of things that might only surface as one of the bridges washed out and we had to reroute everybody to another route, stuff like that.
Josh, you had your hand up.
Great.
Yeah, one of the things about, that's nice about creating a disaster reserve fund is that like. We had a very large, I think we can all agree, a very large disaster. You know, we're borrowing a very large amount of money, and we're paying a small interest percent on that borrowing. If we, you know, building that, that disaster reserve fund expense out, that will generate interest versus having to pay interest for the money that we eventually need for the next disaster. So I think how we decide to use that money in the event of a disaster is like, that is, who knows what the disaster is. So I'm not really concerned about, you know, whether how it's applied in terms of a budgetary plan, but definitely I think the disaster reserve fund expense to create that ability to have immediate cash is very helpful.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Excuse me. Some context I want to offer to the scene is Washington County is third in the nation in declared disasters in the last 14 years, I think it was. The situations that we've just been through as someone who's like living in the village during the flood and its aftermath. We are at the confluence of two potentially wild rivers. My sensitivity toward emergencies hitting this town is very high. This is a vulnerable place. That's like part of the context I want to offer. To me, this budget seems quite reasonable. For that, my one quibble, which I mentioned, I think maybe to Josh last time, is about the telephone, like brand new phone, full year plan, less than $500. So like take $1,000 off the budget, leave everything else. If you can manage with like not the newest phone, but still a new phone. I don't need to talk about it
We
now.
can ask Josh because Josh suggested.
He told me that he did. So
Yeah.
I'm just saying like I hear some sensitivity coming from Peter here about like the size of the number.
Yeah.
You know, maybe $1,000 off that would like make you feel any better about it. Again, to me, this budget feels quite sensible.
Yeah.
And the robustness of your offering, including an entire employee for the year to create institutional memory about this role and what's required, so that we don't have to make the same mistakes over again, that we get to have the neural pathways, the town's neural pathways of disaster response, strong and agile for when the next disaster comes.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, I appreciate your work. I appreciate the service you've provided this town, and I appreciate your budget. Thank you.
I want to add, because it's very helpful that you said that, Francis Rose. I also want to add that we're not out of the woods. Even if we don't have a significant rainfall event, there are two other problems that have surfaced in the last month or so that both seem to me we should start thinking about and preparing for. The first is that all of the clearing, and I've had a discussion with George Springston and Charlie Cogbill about that, because it's a geology and this related thing. All of the clearing that the V-Trans did at the Great Brook bed, where they came down in the 3 weeks after the flood, and they cleared everything out of the Great Brook and turned it into a huge scoured trough. I've been finding out that in each of the subsequent rainfall events, only 2 inches of rain arrives almost instantly at the village. In other words, it used to take a long time to get here because it was held up with all those debris camps and stuff. That's part of a natural water bed. It's scoured now, so it's just like at the bottom of a water slide. And the water that falls upstream arrives simultaneously, almost 20 minutes later in the village. And we had the Mill Street Bridge area upward, in other words, upstream from there, completely fill up with less than 2 inches of rain, twice in a row. So if we get 5 inches of rain, which does happen, we'll see water coming across Hudson Avenue, we'll see flooding across Mill Street, we'll see it going down Owen Bradley's driveway, we'll see it doing exactly what it did before, because they did that change in the brook. There's no resistance anymore to water coming down, so small rainfall events could be a problem, and I'm going to be proposing that we widen the brook as a response to get a river engineer. We got it, Keith Coven, I asked this morning to try and figure out how much services we could get from the state free of charge to do water engineering.
This is a lot of detail that.
Yeah, well, and the second part is
Yeah.
that what we're not, another thing we're not prepared for is, and Ed Hutchinson reminded me of this yesterday, is that there's a tremendous amount of deadfall from windstorms and stuff in the woods, and the fire chief and I have discussed about the possibility of a fire emergency.
Yeah.
Which could be forest fire moving toward the village kind of thing. So we not only have to be prepared for what we would call world climate event changes that are unfortunately we can't do very much about, as well as local climate event emergency that we can do something about. And so I think we're stuck having to look at a future where we're on edge a lot.
So right now, the budget you're proposing is 11,500, right?
That's
Another
correct.
1,000 on the dot. I think.
On the dot, oh, okay.
And I don't know, Francis Rose, if we are going to have a role in paying for the phone service here at the town hall and the internet service here in the town hall. So that's the open-ended question. I didn't write anything into internet and phone because that part hadn't been settled. But that's a negotiation between
See,
the Friends of the Arts, Arts and emergency management. We're still figuring out who does and pays for what.
Yeah, so last time, Josh, you were here, or last time I was here at least, we talked about income, not just expenses, but income, and I'm wondering for some of this stuff, especially like, you know, emergency or temporary food, other things, I just wonder, like, through either the regional planning commission or through emergency management of the state, like, is there funding, is there money? Do they have it, like, they want us to have emergency managers, they want us to have these structures, is there money to help us set that up, and or are there grants? I know we've done some big grants for the shelter pieces, but other grants we should be looking to cover this cost?
I can answer that pretty quickly. Red Cross, the reason I've been trying so hard to get this shelter certified to a certifiable condition is because a lot of these costs, which are upfront costs that occur in the first week or two, are coming with the expectation of eventual reimbursement. But you have to have the money in hand, first of all, to reimburse it. So we don't have a supply of sanitary napkins here. We don't have a supply of baby diapers here. We don't have a supply of toothpaste here. We don't have a supply of food, certainly. And I was going to put out an RFP for the food contract to feed people in the shelter. It might cost, say, for 20 people, something like $1,500 a day. I don't know. But if we have to spend that money, we won't have it unless it's in the shelter reserve fund.
No, I understand that. I was just trying to, like, as we think about, we have to have money on hand, but then it's gonna get paid back.
Yeah.
Like. Gosh,
I'm not sure what the question is then.
Other grants that we're not aware.
well, like we have to put this in the budget, but then if there's income that's going to offset that, like we're gonna get reimbursed.
Yeah.
That is a factor, because then it's actually, we might put money out, we get it back, by the end of the year, it's a zero, right? Like, that's what I'm asking.
Yeah,
I guess I should ask,
Well-
have we moved to the shelter reserve fund?
No, I'm talking about the emergency.
Josh had something to say there too,
Oh,
on that
okay.
point.
Specific to that, I'm not aware of a grant, but if it sounds like a thing there might be a grant for, there's probably a grant. So it's worth exploring.
Yeah, I just wonder, like,
And
emergency management, we're in the number 3 county in the country for emergencies. We're setting up this structure, we need to have it regularly. Can we find a grant that just pays for these kinds of costs for the structure? And obviously there's like the disaster cost, there's the shelter cost, but like, have we looked into that? Because, you know, it is a 161% increase overall of the budget, right? And then like, we don't, it's,
that's,
you know?
Let's leave that up to the grant administrator to, or her.
Well, but the question is, are we looking at, like, I guess that's part of that, because I think you tipped us off to like think about things like not just expenses, but expenses and then the potential income.
Well, that's why I said I didn't understand the question. Are you now asking a question about the disaster reserve fund that Karen
No,
proposed?
no, I'm asking to set up an emergency management group to manager with this structure that has, you know, first aid, like has all the things that are in your budget, like printing, postage. Is there a place that we can get funds to pay for that?
No.
Well, I think Josh just said,
Any more than the fire department could get a grant to pay for their postage and office supplies and all that kind of stuff. It's just a
We're not-
town, it's a town office.
We're not talking about before the disaster, we're talking about catching up. So we have to have the funds to pay for those immediate expenses. But is that your? point?
well, that there, but also like, I just wonder in this time of these disasters and these things happening, like. Are there charitable groups that would give money and go ahead.
Well,
After the.
as you know, I started my seasonal job at Capstone
Yeah.
this afternoon, and one of the people I work with oversees the funds that were donated to the town of Plainfield, which Capstone manages. And she suggested to me, because I mentioned we were talking about this particular budget tonight, she says, there's quite a balance in that fund. Could we use any of that? That was basically donated for disaster relief to the town of Plainfield.
Could we ask Pact?
Well, yes,
To
we would
donate?
ask Pat. It was originally $70,000, I think Liz Sharp told me, so.
Yeah,
What-
quite a bit.
What's that?
I said quite a bit.
Quite a bit, yes. And I think only less than 20,000 has gone out to individual grants. I mean, people who have asked for help. It's 50,000.
Yeah, they
Um,
generally get like a $2,500 grant or something
Yeah.
like that. Typical.
So the answer to that is yes, although we haven't quantified any of our expenses for the prior disaster. I mean, you talk about percentages, we just had a disaster that's 800% worse than anything that's ever happened to us. So we have an 800% increase in disaster related effort and cost. Getting some of that back would be lovely, but we didn't spend it in dollars. This all came from, we had volunteers giving us food all summer. We had volunteers cooking us food all summer. We had volunteers giving us clothing. We had volunteers.
And this is my point, is if we
Yeah.
get Pact or somewhere farther afield than Pact. To donate
Yeah,
for our emergency manager and all the pieces to it.
Yeah.
As the structure, because then there's that person in place to help people. It would seem to fall into the mission of it. I'm just saying, like, as we think about this, because this is, we are far from the only place in town budget where we're seeing these astronomical increases. As we try to keep taxes down for folks, because people can't afford those either, like, how creative are we getting with how we're paying for these things?
well, I have a
That's my question.
suggestion, which might solve this, but I have 3 different pots we're looking at: shelter reserve fund, disaster reserve fund, and emergency management budget. And if PACT were approached looking at how we are structuring a reserve fund for a disaster, they were approached to donate that to the town of Plainfield to offset a disaster reserve fund, then that itself would become the interest-bearing account that Josh was talking about. That would leave us in a better position, not only to recover from the prior flood, but also to be prepared for the next one. But I don't like the idea of floating the Department of Emergency Management on donations, especially since its cost is so relatively small. I mean, it's what, 6,000 plus the stipend. And so I'd like the town to respect the existence of this department as being real and not hypothetical the way prior select boards have treated it. It is like a position, just like the town clerk. It is a real job. It is a real person who has real expenses, and it's something that the town's taxpayers should be committed to.
The only reason I bring this up is because I think because of the nature and frequency of the emergencies we've had, it is probably a place more than our fire department, more than our town clerk's office, that could fundraise and offset costs.
I don't want to add that to my work if that's.
No, I'm not
what
asking,
saying.
I'm not asking you to do it. I'm asking like, it could be the grants team. It could be, like, there's other people.
Yeah.
I'm just like, like, we have a whole huge budget with all of these pieces.
Yeah.
And from my experience in the nonprofit world, this feels like a piece that we could get help from the outside from. And I'm not saying that it changes anything about this. I'm just saying, have we thought about, and we do, I will say, we are asking the town treasurer, we have asked the town clerk.
Yeah.
How do you bring in revenue? So we are treating you in the same way that we're treating the town treasurer and the
And I
town
brought
clerk.
in $39,000 and
Yeah.
53 cents in this fiscal year. Excuse me, and add to that, if the AmeriCorps starts working on another third, it's 25,000 for the stipend plus 6,000 for the administration. So that's another 31,000 that I've written a grant for. I mean, I've written grants for 60,000 on behalf of the town. It covers the paving up front. It covers things we would have had to do to meet ADA requirements for this building. I'm covering costs for the town. So I'm asking the town to come back and cover costs without worrying about whether we have to go around with a hat.
I just, and that's not what we're saying, I'm saying, I feel like. I'm unclear as to why you're offended by this, because all I'm trying to do is actually figure out a way for us to say, this amount is fine and we can do it, and actually think it through. I'm actually trying to help.
Right.
Think about how this lessens the blow and actually makes this
Yeah.
feasible and not as painful.
Yeah, well, it's been a tough 5 years for me. I mean, since the reason I'm responding the way I am is because I'm always like the last child at the door begging for cola, and in my respectful way of trying to say it is the disaster reserve fund proposed by Karen Hatcher is a way to store up money to deal with the real costs of an unfolding disaster. The disaster that has already happened, I already took care of with a whole lot of extra people helping me out, and that one's covered. If we can ask for money for anything, I would ask for it for a shelter reserve fund. I mean, not a shelter reserve fund, for a disaster reserve fund, because Community Foundation's given us a ton of money. Serve Vermont just gave us a ton of money for the emergency management side of things. We deserve that because we do good things with the money that they give us. And what you're talking about is this big lump of costs that occurs when a disaster unfolds. They've already been met by donations, and I mean, we probably had, I think, if we just look at, somebody told me we had $135,000 in GoFundMe donations for individual people and households. We had hundreds of volunteers. I mean, some of them working only for an hour, some of them working day after day after day. We had these enormous, uncountable gifts from the Mennonites, from the Southern Baptists, from the Methodist Conference. I distributed completely off the radar $15,000 on behalf of the Methodist Church to individual households who couldn't wait to go through the PAC process and needed the money now.
And that's just the point of a fund.
Yeah,
So that if you need the money,
yeah,
it's there to use, right? And maybe, and your point is, we can then replenish the fund perhaps with a grant, which takes a long time, but it's the emergency fund. It's why we just borrowed a ton of money.
yeah,
Because we need money to pay vendors for those emergencies that our
yeah,
normal budget
right.
can't handle. So I think both of you are right. That I think we should have a fund because we are a very high risk area, it would seem. So that the stress of wondering where the money is going to come from to deal with this emergency is somewhat covered.
And that's where Stefan comes in. I mean, in Moortown, I asked him the question a year ago, actually, before we had this flood. I said, what do you have in reserve? What has your town given you in reserve so that you can tap into really fast moving events and take care of them as quickly as possible? And he said, I've got a reserve fund. I said, how big is it? It was more than, I think it was 12,000 or something like that. But it is an important way to be prepared. And, but, those of us who are volunteers or volunteers with stipends, whatever, we work when the demand is there and take a rest when there's no demand.
Yeah.
But that's part of the job description.
I'd like to, we're going to run out of time and we're going to be late again. I'd like to move to the next item that we have, so is the shelter.
So how that works is very straightforward. I have, once we get certified as shelter, we're not now. So if I spend money for food, I don't get that money back. if I go to, say, the three vendors that I think we took food from, and say, what would you charge us to feed 10 people or 20 people breakfast, lunch, and dinner, which is what we were doing at the shelter. We were feeding people breakfast, lunch, and dinner. They would quote me a price, which would probably be higher than all the money that we have in the shelter reserve fund. But the idea is that after 4 or 5 days of feeding people at our own expense, that we could submit bills to Red Cross and they would reimburse us if we were certified. So
what's
I know
that
that-
fund?
we've been putting $700 a year into the shelter
Mhm.
reserve fund, and I would suggest doubling that to $1,400 a year. So that it would be capable of feeding people for a week, basically.
And this is a fund that would be additive. That
It's
would,
just
it would
additive.
just, if we didn't use it, it would just get bigger and bigger and bigger and we could.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Presumably
The
have it
current
in an
balance is
interest bearing
3,000
account.
Something, maybe. Yeah, I think the current balance is close to 3,000.
Okay. All right. Any questions? About the reserve fund for here? Okay, I think we understand and I'm in favor of funds generally, if we can figure out how to cover them, that's
Yeah.
the.
And I also know that for Peter, I'll be preparing an emergency management report. I think you said the 24th of January, right? For.
That's the drop dead date.
Drop dead date. I'm gonna do the report.
Yeah,
let's do it before
that's a
that.
Friday, so.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to do that, but in conjunction with that, I'm going to try and also build your knowledge as a select board in what the emergency management director position requires, so that you can help me find a replacement for myself. In other words, I'll
Yes.
provide some background information.
Just on that note about the report and any other reports, I did speak with the printer this afternoon. We had about a half hour phone conversation and she is accepting reports now and doing layout now. So the sooner,
Okay,
as soon as we get them, I'm sending them.
That's a good point.
So I'm hoping that the big ones don't all come on Friday,
The day before.
January 24th.
Right. I'll
So,
avoid that. I'll avoid that.
Well, Peter, as we get, if there are ones we're waiting for, or not hearing, like I think other of the select board would be happy to help reach out to folks and
yeah.
remind them.
I mean, everyone has been very responsive. They immediately replied when I told them about Bram's situation and they should send me stuff. So almost everybody, I think there's 3 people who haven't responded yet, but we have other opportunities to speak with them.
Yeah. Okay.
yep, great, well,
Thanks,
thank you,
Michael.
thank you.
Sure.
Thank you, Michael.
We were supposed to talk about the recreation. Public arts. Budget review.
Yeah,
Josh, do you have any update on the Recreation Public Arts Committee budget review?
I didn't have anything. I didn't have the updates, so I'm not quite sure.
did somebody reach out specifically to Jamie and?
Well, I thought she was gonna be here and I don't
Okay.
see her on
No,
Zoom.
because I went back and in reading the minutes for approval that she was going to come back and talk to us about some questions that we had when they made their original presentation.
Right, and that's why I was on here with her attending, so I don't know.
I don't have anything, I don't have any new information from Jamie.
Okay. I guess all we really need to know is what they are expecting to ask for.
And so
Well, we
there's a message in the email, I think sent to all of us, $7,122.08. Oh, excuse me, this is last year.
Yeah. We have a budget, it's, 100-3085, a recreational department budget. And I think these are the numbers that we went over with her.
Okay,
So we have numbers, and they're the numbers that she provided. I don't know what questions we have, or if there were specific pieces.
Yeah, the questions I think appeared in the minutes. If we could take a minute to find
Yeah,
what meeting was she here at? What date was that?
I'm not.
It was
sure,
not-
But I will.
It was not the last meeting. I think it was the one before.
I think it was too,
The 16th.
Sounds right.
yeah.
Fifth. Oops. We're fifth counties in the country of federal disaster. There's Washington County, Kentucky. Some reason, so I guess don't name yourself Washington County. Yes. I remember that because when you said that, I had posted that on Facebook. I said, here I am, sitting on top of the hill, and I just this number here. Number
Um,
5.
So the proposed budget, this is from our minutes that actually we're approving today. The proposed budget for Recreation and Public Arts Committee totals $8,750, covering various expenses including mowing, trash, and power bills. A request was made to allocate an additional $500 to the Recreation Reserve Fund, which currently has about $1,900 in it. There is a need to establish a clear reserve fund for the Recreation and Public Arts Committee, as previous allocations could not be located in the accounts. We propose that Old Home Day budget be increased from $900 to $1,800. Better support the event.
That was what I think they were gonna come back and talk about.
Sector agreed to review the Old Home Day proposal and finalize a budget request by January 6th. So that was the question is the 1,800, the doubling of the amount for Old Home Days,
Right,
which
Yeah.
wasn't part of. It was like separate, because the Recreation Department doesn't technically
that's correct.
put on Old Home Days.
Right,
Jamie, as a person, has put on Old Home Days, and so
Yeah.
she is in both places.
Yeah.
But it's actually, an Old Home Days is not part of the Recreation Department budget.
No, and having chaired that committee 7 years myself,
Yeah.
neither is the mowing is in that budget, the portalette is in that budget, and the rec committee has no control over that whatsoever.
yeah,
You know, so and it was like always like,
Yeah,
who's actually in charge here, you know, so.
yeah, I don't know who decides we're putting Portalette out and for how long and for how much.
Well, and that's why she was talking about a composting toilet, you know, at some point.
Yeah. I
So,
think that's the.
and also the mowing discussion was how often is it mowed? I mean, she was thinking, well, they come every week, and maybe that's not necessary.
Well, that's what I think Francis Rose brought up.
Yeah,
the
yeah.
frequent mowing.
Yeah,
So I don't know if somebody can reach out to Jamie to remind her that we'd like some more details on the home days part of it.
So this is actually a misnomer on the agenda. It's not actually budget review finalization for recreation, public arts. It's about Old Home Days. It's like the
Yeah,
agenda
yeah.
item is.
Well, I think because we asked Jamie during the recreation department thing, we put it in, but really it should be a whole Old Home Days budget line.
yeah,
that we
because
need to have Discussion on,
I think the other budget was something we had talked about and kind of settled on.
yeah,
Okay, so looking for Jamie to come to the next board meeting in 1 week's time, be ready to discuss Old Home Day. Josh?
I'd say, given the trajectory of all of the budgets that we've looked at tonight, doubling the Old Home Day budget is probably reasonable, considering all of the cost increases across the board for everything everywhere.
well, and that's the one thing that Jamie did say was that just getting performers and getting the things that are part of it.
Yeah.
The costs have gone up.
A townwide party for $900 is like hard.
I will just say, I don't know that we have enough, I am inclined to maybe just agree that we move on because I don't know that anyone has actually officially been put in charge of next year's Old Home Day, so I don't know if Jamie's or anybody, I don't know whether beyond our treasurer is the right person to answer the question about what we're doing, because it isn't like an appointed town role.
normally I would volunteer to just call Jamie
Yeah.
and ask, you know, hey, we
Yeah.
had this on, there was some confusion, but because my son is on the rec committee, he doesn't want me to do that, so I'm
Well, this isn't a rec committee thing, it's an old home days.
We,
committee.
yeah, we don't think so, right?
No, no, I mean, based on the notes, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
All we need to do is ask about old home days, which is not a rec committee, project.
I do see how it streamlines the scene to simply ask our treasurer if we can cover that.
I think we can cover that.
And then we don't have to call Jamie into the next meeting again. Thank you, Josh.
Listers?
Lister's budget, do you know what that entails?
No, but Kaylee is here.
I just noticed that was on the agenda, so I figured I would come, but I don't know anything about it. I mean, I know what it was, but I don't know, were we asked to make any requests, or I don't know how that works.
I mean, generally, every department on the town budget just gives what they want and explains why, and if it's no changes, then it's pretty easy, but it looks like it's no changes.
What is
And
it?
You're the lister's budget for lister's salaries, lister supplies, postage, seminar and dues, GIS maps, software, and mileage.
And what is the amount?
The amount.
It's all level funded from last year.
43, 44, 50. 30,
Like 6,000.
A little bit over.
Yeah.
It's like 6,300 approximately. I can use my calculator actually.
Yeah, no, I think that sounds right to me.
And it's not general fund money, correct? Or,
Does this come out of our?
Not sure exactly, it's. Well, I think it would be general fund, because it's 100.
Why wouldn't it be in your minds?
just something that sticks in my mind from something Sandy Ross said.
The amount is 6,275.
Okay.
Well, that's an easy one.
Yeah, 0% increase.
Yeah.
We love the work of the listers.
Yeah,
We do.
thank you.
Thanks.
It is a 100 in your chart.
That doesn't mean anything. Per se, but, the only thing I would question is probably if the GIS map, what we pay for the GIS map and the software would have changed. You know, like, I did go back and look at, I don't have my computer with me. But I did go back and I think when I initially entered the numbers, I went back and looked at the expenditures for a few of the past years. And I may have. It did change from last year, but at some point recently, the software did get more costly. So that was updated pretty recently, and I'm going off my memory, so.
Is that software a monthly fee? And unlike in the old days when you could buy software, now you have to lease it? Do you know, Kaylee? The software?
I don't know. I actually don't know. I think it's either a monthly or a yearly fee, probably.
Yeah, okay.
Mhm.
That seems to be where all the programs are headed.
Mm-hmm.
Make that money.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, thank you. We know what we're gonna deal with. We have a discussion of town office and how to modify and assist with roles. Thinking about I think we're thinking about the new employee that we're looking for to help Bram, Josh, Carol, and what role they should have. So I think we have an opportunity to hire somebody full-time. But then the question is, can they justify the full-time because of the work they do? What's your sense?
I don't think it has to be. 32 hours a week. for that
Okay.
role. I think. For, the. Like, is, what I'm looking at is. Meeting somebody in. The current situation is somebody who can step in. Maybe with like more hours for the next. Like.
2 months.
6, 7 months, with more hours, but then as we get further on into like the next fiscal year and things calm down a little bit, hopefully we won't have another flood immediately at the beginning of the next fiscal year. And I don't think it needs to be a high degree of like activity in perpetuity. I think we have like a lot of administrative load because there's a lot of things that are getting kind of shuffled around right now. And so the the main, so it's sort of difficult to say, well, we want you to, we want to hire you full-time, but then we want to like a part-time position after 6 months. But,
Could we consider I'm just thinking I think there was a candidate who wanted full-time, and could we consider, say, a temporary, this is kind of to your point, a temporary full-time for some period of time and then slacken off the hours and see if that's possible?
yeah, I don't know enough about the functions of the clerk's responsibilities to kind of have an informed decision on
Mhm.
how that would play out. There is, with the, like recently what I've seen is that we need a lot of customer service functions fulfilled that are like, we're at a time, I'm guessing that we are at a point in time that is hopefully temporary, where there's a lot of needs and a lot of attention on the office. And so having somebody who is experienced in office management, it would make sense. But we do have some plans to improve services and through using some new programs we're going to implement, hopefully before the next tax day for school 3. Setting up a program with a company called Municipay, which will allow people to pay online. They'll be able to get their dog license online. They'll be able to pay their taxes online, fees, and create that will integrate with our system so that for that kind of intake function, hopefully it will reduce some delinquency and and it doesn't present any cost to the town.
Does that make the office more efficient?
Indeed.
Okay, because they're handling papers, they're handling cash payments, they're handling things
Yeah,
like that.
if you didn't have to, you gotta open all the mail, you have to enter all everything manually, and a lot of that administrative load is managed through that system. And the East Montpelier uses it, and a few other neighboring towns use Municipay, and it's a great feature. So,
Okay,
these are some things that we don't have. We haven't implemented yet. So as far as what it does to reduce the amount of like point of contact where you have to have somebody working at all times, the So that's something that maybe that reduces a lot of the administrative load. There are, I think there's, there's going to be sort of I think a settling down of some of the things once there's less, urgency around all of the needs revolving around, the disasters and
Illnesses.
municipal projects. The all of these locations that are, that we have to kind of give attention to in the town that are damaged. Those all require municipal project management, and the sort of locating and hiring and negotiating all of those situations increases the the administrative load on the office, because there's so
Yeah. I'm just concerned about the general feel when you're in the office and the stress on everybody. I mean, people can't think of Carol in particular, but Graham, I mean, he, and you too, but you seem to have it handled a little more, but man, the pressures in there are terrible. And I'm glad to hear that the longer term, we're gonna be settling down, but I'm just wondering because we're now responsible essentially for the function of the office. I'm wondering what we can do, yeah.
I mean, I think just to address schemes, hiring schemes, I see a part-time hire, a full-time hire, or multiple part-time hires, say
Mhm.
2 part-time hires. That is just to like frame the conversation of who or what are we looking for. To what you just said, Josh, around certainly high needs now, I'm also feeling the intense stress and discomfort of like office staff right now. And how do we get help soon as possible is like really the piece. And I think there remains a question that has kind of been floating around, which is, are we replacing Kristen's role, or is there want for a managerial position within the office? Strategically, is there want for an office manager at the town office? Because like all these questions kind of focus then the search for what we're looking for, who we're looking for. Otherwise, I think we can kind of go in circles about what are the trajectories and where are we going and et cetera, but like really what is needed in that office now?
Yeah,
If I might, Carol in her note, and I highlighted it in the response to everybody, which is eventually with a town clerk doing their duties and a treasurer doing their duties, and me, this is Carol speaking, assisting both of them with the administrative position will require less hours. In other words, that's the end game. That's where we should arrive. When the town voted to create 2 positions, okay, that was essentially doubling the capacity, right? And so theoretically, there's a lot of additional capacity there. The reality is between illness, disasters, and a really not smooth transition from the last office holders to the current, meaning terrible lack of training. We're not there yet. But I don't see adding more capacity as the answer. I think we need to focus on, and we mentioned this when you were appointed treasurer, that maybe by town meeting day, I think we said, but that's an arbitrary date. We need to have good job descriptions. The statute says this is what a town clerk should do, this is the town treasurer to do, but within any individual town, there's going to be the uniquenesses of the tasks that take place in that office. And I think that's our responsibility as a select board to get that done. And I think we look to you guys to kind of sort that out and make recommendations, but maybe we need to have a a staff meeting,
Well, I mean, we had talked about doing that
Yeah,
in January, or at least some of us had a few months ago. I mean, obviously, things have changed, there's illness, I don't know what the reality of pulling that together in this month is, but
not in the budget month, yeah.
I mean, I guess what I see, and I think it's, obviously still a transition, a work in progress, but like, I see we have 2 leader positions in the office already. It's a 4-person office and there are 2, the town clerk, town treasurer are like appointed. They're the leader, they are the leaders of the office. And so if we need to give them more support, if we need to give them more training to get them to a place where they can like manage that office. And I think part of that is them delineating their roles clearly and also Carol's role clearly, and the things that are on Carol's plate that need to go back to these leadership roles.
Yeah.
And then the admin assistant. And I think if we actually do those pieces and everyone gets up to 100%, which is gonna take some time, like that's where we can then function, I think, with what we have. I mean, it feels like to bring in another manager in a place that has 2 managers and there's only 4 staff total, feels like a lot. It's gonna just make it even harder. The dynamics will be even harder because who is that office manager managing?
and how do you organize that? Yeah,
No, that's a fair point.
yeah,
I mean,
and any new hire is gonna take management time,
yeah,
right? So that's not something we have a lot of right now. So, yeah, I think it's a good point, Dan.
so then that leads me back, circling around to, okay, part-time administrative assistant help.
Yeah,
Then for the very, very near term, that administrative assistant help is going to be helpful. But like right now, Kristen is still there and the office is still overwhelmed. So is there want for a second part-time hire
Hmm.
to like help bridge the gap between now and something that doesn't feel unhealthfully stressful?
Or is it, how many hours does Kristen work now? 20?
I think she's only 2 days.
Doesn't feel like that many, but.
That's what's in the posting, by the way, is 20 hours.
And
So I wonder, because I mean, all the way up to 31 hours is still part-time. I
Yeah.
think, under our personnel policy. And so is it that part-time is just a 30-hour part-time that gives them 50% more capacity? Helps them get more done, and then we scale it back down. I know that once you get to full-time, then there's the healthcare and the other things that add to cost, but also if you're then gonna bring them back down, then we have to take them off that, like it becomes like harder for us to figure out what to do.
Well,
if
you
we
can,
take someone
I
from
think in the
full-time to
personnel
part-time.
policy, you can do temporary.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That is not,
that is not, yeah,
that is not, require
that-
benefits. So-
yeah.
But right now, we're having trouble getting the one that we need,
Yeah.
Well, but part of that might be that we put it down for 20 hours. And there may be people that are interested in more than 20 hours. That's what's on the listing on the website. I'm just saying,
Yeah.
like, what you put up, like, it's 20 hours, it's 30 hours, it's full-time, it's part-time, affects your applicant pool.
Sure.
And
right?
we haven't actually interviewed any of the candidates who have put forth.
We have
Res-
2,
resumes.
we have,
We have
well, we
2.
have, no, we have 1 who wants to talk about the role and has questions before they apply. And we have 1 that has put in an application.
And I had talked to my neighbor who's not interested
Okay,
when he said that.
okay.
I thought Bram had told me that he had interviewed one person. But. And he didn't think they were appropriate.
I
Okay,
think I heard that also.
yeah, I don't know. He didn't mention, I mean, in his communications was just about us posting it and us getting it out there more widely, so.
And as I've spent time in the office, I try to see things that might be. Somebody who's new at this could come in and be helpful. And so I think of the window. Greeting people coming in, but I can just see somebody come in. I want to look at this, and then the new person won't have any idea where to go, and they'll have to ask Carol. So it's like it makes more work for Carol in a way.
But I mean, I think that again, it's like processes over time, like.
Yeah.
There could
time.
be a thing where they create a guide for a
Yeah.
volunteer to work the front, like Cutler, I'm sure has one in other places.
Yeah.
And then you could have a guy and train someone to work the front. And obviously it's not overnight, but like that could be something that happens and they're answering the phones, they're the first filter. then when Carol or Josh or Bram or whoever has time, they can say, oh, I have 4 phone messages. You don't have to answer, get on the phone as soon as someone calls. Like, that's not like, especially if you're trying to like work something out financially or do something else, stopping in the middle of something and answering a 5-minute question and then going back to it is not the most efficient way to do.
Very
things.
inefficient, yeah. Yeah.
Because Kristen, because in almost the entire time I've been in the office, Kristen has better notice that. I haven't put in a lot of effort to train Kristen up to the things that I think would be simple to have the administrative assistant functions operate in a capacity that would assist me, because it's not, you know, why would I burden Kristen with new learning that is not necessary?
Right.
But in the event of hiring a new person, I think it's a different situation where I have an outline of how to, you know, delineate the task, not only for those in the office, but you know, I've made an outline for the sort of the wider, all of the town roles, like who is accountable, who is responsible, and who provides support, who needs to be informed when all of these things happen. And I know I've shown that to maybe Carl, I don't know, maybe I showed it to somebody here.
I think it was me.
And you know, so like, I don't think that once we get an understanding of like what are all the functions of the office, like down onto like, you know, a spreadsheet where we can easily sort of see how it all fits together, but that all takes time, and there's you know, the you know, I think in, you know, in the event that, you know, we find some, I would say 24 hours a week, probably, like, because, you know, just having somebody there on the days that the door's open, probably ideal. You know, it's, you know, a lot of what Kristen is doing also does revolve around some other functions that might not be necessary with a 5-person board. Select, you know, with a 5-person select board versus a 3-person select board, you know, maybe those functions can shift to like, you know, people on the select board.
Something like and this is an example, we actually elect a secretary who does the minutes and is responsible for that. And the
Yeah.
vice chair or someone is actually responsible for noticing the meetings and doing like, or the chair, one of them.
Yeah.
Actually puts it up in the places. So the admin assistant doesn't have to do those things.
Well, I'm of a different opinion, because I think that puts that person at a disadvantage for participating in the meeting. If you're focusing on taking the minutes and doing that. In terms of posting, Kristen posts for not just us, but other entities, and so I think that's an appropriate role to combine. I mean, there are many entities that have to have their notices, and to have it done consistently and make sure, you know, the Times Argus gets it, the social media posts, and it's
Well,
put up.
I think this is one of
places.
those things where it's like if we as a board are saying we want to help with the current capacity issues in the office, these are things that we are directly affected by, that we could take on, that might be more helpful than us volunteering to work the window.
Oh, yeah. Well, I already told Kristen that expecting her to be leading, that I would take on the agenda. I'd have to be trained in how to distribute it, because I don't know how to do that, but you know, I could take that on.
You know, that's just an example.
Yeah.
It's small, yeah, I know, but
There's
as you
some
point out,
Well, and it's also, we, you know, theoretically, we have 2 meetings a month, and so it is 2 times a month for all these activities. We have been meeting weekly, so we have put double the workload in those activities on a person with the same number of hours.
Hopefully we're soon,
Well, you said
Done with-
you said that in October.
yeah. True.
One thing that we can do to help, I think, is the hiring process, the interviewing. Kristen is willing to help us interview, a replacement for herself. Do we want to have 1 or 2 select board members
I think 2 is optimal.
do that with her? Talk to the person who's interested, in at least have a conversation and interview the person who's applied. And if more applications come in.
I recognize I'm well positioned to be one of those people.
That'd be great.
I am not this time of year.
Fair enough.
What I can commit to Francis Rose is as well, knowing that I have a new job, and so like, if I can't make the actual interviews, if we record them, I can watch them after and give my thoughts
I mean,
as a second voice.
I guess alternately, there could be like an alt A and an alt B, like, you know,
Yeah.
if Carl.
Yeah.
Dan.
Oh, did Carlson even do it? I didn't hear it. if he
No,
did.
no, no, I guess like
Oh,
if one of you can't make it, perhaps the other.
Yeah,
I didn't know you said you could do it. I was only offering, because I didn't think,
Let's volunteer Patty.
I didn't think either of you said.
She's not.
I didn't know that you said you could do it. I didn't.
Yeah, I didn't.
I didn't hear you.
No, no, I didn't hear that or say that either.
No, we did it before, when Patty couldn't do it with you. You and Patty were actually interviewing.
Oh, yeah, yeah, for
For
the
select
appointment
board members.
position.
Oh, no,
You know, I guess all
did
I'm
that.
saying is like, I'm well
What's that?
positioned to interview the person.
interview for, oh, for the road commission.
No,
For
no,
Peter.
for Peter.
But no, also the road,
I think I met with you
the,
guys.
the last time we hired a road crew person in.
Oh,
Denver.
yeah,
Francis Rose and I did. the
That's
hiring
right.
that.
yeah, but we did we talked to
Yeah.
3 people who are interested in
Yeah.
the board.
So why don't, Francis Rose, if you would coordinate with Kristen,
Okay,
On
and
the
then
two people.
we'll get a date and then I'll pitch the date to you all,
Yeah.
including Patty.
yeah,
And if we can pick up a second
Yeah.
select board person, great.
and it would be, if possible, if we're, especially if you're doing it in the upstairs room. There, you could record
Hmm.
the interview and then other select board members could, or
Yeah,
Josh or
any of us,
Graham,
yeah.
or anyone who would want to view and give an opinion could do that. I don't know, if you know,
I was just remembering a while back, Bram, I think right after his incident, said something about posting this on Indeed, and does anybody know if that happened?
I don't think so, because unless you did, I was waiting for the Indeed login, which I was gonna do it, but I needed our town login for the Indeed website. Which,
I don't know anything about
I
it.
don't
well, no, we don't, yeah.
I don't know anything about
We have like,
it.
we would have an account, which already has a profile and stuff. We would need that login to then post the
Do
job.
we have one, in fact?
Well, I think we've posted jobs there before, like the road
Okay.
crew job. So we do, it's just one of the many things that we're, data wise, we're scrambling around with Graham being out.
Yeah.
Trying to get into all the accounts and all the different things. So if I have posted on Indeed before and other sites, I'm happy to do it if I have a login.
Okay, great.
I talked to Bram this morning. He sounded really good. I
Okay.
know he has his surgery tomorrow, so probably
Yeah.
tomorrow's not the day to call him and ask.
Yeah, we
For the
could,
password. but-
we'll wait until he's back on his feet.
I mean, I think have we posted on Front Porch Forum?
I thought I saw it somewhere, but I don't know if it's Front Porch Forum or.
Wouldn't hurt to do it again.
Since
Yeah.
you're gonna be, would you take from the website and post it on Front Porch Forum, and you could even use your contact email if your select board one, if
And
people have
does Kristen-
questions or wanna.
And does Kristen know Indeed at all?
I don't know that. but
Yeah,
I can check.
Kristen and Carol were in the office when I asked Josh about this, and I think we all, and none of them
Oh,
had
okay.
that login,
Okay,
as far as I know.
I mean, I guess the one chance, yeah, never mind. Okay, yeah.
all right, well, that sounds like a good plan.
Great.
We have approved draft minutes, we have some
Oh,
minutes.
there was that one agenda item add I wanted.
Oh, I'm
select board
sorry,
years
yes, you
about.
did. Yeah, you wanna do that
Yeah,
now?
it's a safety concern about the Mill Street Bridge. The town office is fielding complaints, not complaints, concerns. Kind of hearing the complaints coming in, the concerns coming in. in my life as a parent of a 4-year-old, I have also indeed had the same concerns seeing my child, a 4-year-old, bicycle across the Mill Street Bridge. If they like swerve to the right, it gets like really bad in a hurry as they kind of tumble right through the bridge into the river.
Yeah, because there's an opening like this.
It's giant opening, so there's like no guardrails, there's no fencing on that bridge. I'm not the only one who has noticed it, like,
Okay.
and I didn't even like think to bring it here until I started hearing concerns coming into the town office as well. I checked in with hazard mitigation about it to see if it was in their purview. They offered like a solution of sorts, which is Tractor Supply Company, basically getting storm fencing, unrolling storm fencing,
Like that plastic fencing you're talking about.
like
Snow fence, that was my idea
Snow
back in the
fence.
week we put the bridge up.
We talked about it, yeah. And
approximately like $250, maybe $300 worth of storm fencing, snow fencing
Well,
is a potential solution that we could unroll.
and related to that, I don't know if you all saw, Carol sent out some pictures from Balin.
Yeah,
about
yeah.
Along the rec field, the cliff into the,
there's a cliff.
what do you call it, a cliff?
Yeah.
Behind the shelter down to the brook. And he says, again, it's an exposed,
The good news about
Areas.
that is that their Rose Paul got back about there being like a robust planting scheme already like in the works for the rec field park edge.
There is, yeah.
So I mean, that is any comfort to me. I mean, it is like a dangerous edge. I'm not, yeah, it is a dangerous edge. In terms of like relative dangers, that being a road, the Mill Street Bridge being a road that cars speed down.
Yeah.
And there being kids of all ages on all the time without a sidewalk to get to the rec field. That to me feels like a greater danger.
I guess
Is
one-
this something, so just as a question to the road commissioner, is this, so many hats, is this not just something that like you can talk to Michael about and they can just do, like, we don't need like a select board vote for a $250 snow fence purchase, do we? Okay,
And is that gonna affect the plowing? I'm just wondering, I mean, there's gotta be a safety issue here, but can the,
We can whip stitch the bottom of the snow fence along the rail on the bottom.
right,
And then whip stitch it at the top. They plow the snow onto the fence and it falls through. And then, but any children caught by the plow just get thrown onto the fence.
well, we can only protect so many things if kids are running in front of snow plows.
could we ask Michael to do that?
Um,
Not that he's gonna be happy about it, maybe we can get some volunteers to actually do it, but if we can get the fence,
Yeah, we can get the fence.
Yeah.
That's all.
okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, I've heard also from the people. Okay,
Yeah, thank you all.
yeah. Um,
I make a motion that we approve the draft minutes for December 16th and December 23rd, 2024.
is there a second?
Second.
second, third.
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Unanimous.
And we have approval of warrants, accounts payable January 9, 19, 2024, and 2 warrants dated January 1 and dated January 3, 2025.
Is that all the ones in there?
They are these here, yeah,
Um,
and I think, yeah, both of you guys signed it.
I make a motion that we approve accounts payable for December 9th, 2024 and December 19th, 2024. And warrants dated January 1st and January 3rd, 2025. Along with payroll dated December 12th, 2024, December 19th, 2024, December 26th, 2024, and December 28th, 2024.
Second.
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. And our next meeting is the 13th, which is next Monday again.
Do we have a tentative agenda?
I'd like to leave it open. We need to talk about
budget.
the budget.
We need to approve a budget, right?
Okay.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
we're gonna need, Josh here for that too.
Yeah, I was hoping that
Yeah,
was the answer, that we may have one or two small items.
there was,
There
there
was
was
that-
there was an
the light
issue,
issue,
the
right?
light issue, which I hope isn't too long. But we've been putting her off for a long time and need to take care of it, much as we can. I don't think there's anything else that I know of.
Just in terms of, I mean, the budget is obviously our biggest thing to get ready for town meeting. I signed up tomorrow for the League of Cities and Towns sort of pre-budget. What do you need to do to warn the articles properly for town meeting and
Oh.
stuff? And I was looking at some of their documentation. And I'm thinking of the motion that we had on the warning last year for the budget. And the model that the League of Cities and Towns has out basically says that the voters are asked to approve X amount, of which Y amount is to be raised by taxes. And the reason that there's two numbers is because the first one recognizes the other sources of income, the other revenues.
Which was your point from the beginning.
Exactly.
Yeah,
So we will have,
So
Those
we
two.
need to be looking at the revenues as well as the expenditure side.
yeah, definitely.
would,
Well, I'm glad you're going.
with, well, you're gonna take the train. Between now and next Monday, are you able to get with Josh, at least with the numbers we have thus far, and we may change them, to have a sample of the warning based on what you said, based on the numbers, just so that if we change numbers, we just have to change the numbers in the warning?
Oh, yeah,
Does that
I mean,
make
the
sense?
language is pretty simple. It's
Okay.
just fill in the
Well, I just wanna
numbers.
make sure we have it fit, like, actually
Yeah.
here on next Monday,
Yeah.
so we can vote
Yeah,
on the warning.
but as I've been going through here, I mean, there's a number of other pages in here where we like list the
Yeah.
dog license. I mean, it's not a report from someone, and I've sort of said,
Yeah.
okay, I'll work with,
Yeah.
Bram to get it done.
The other things, if there's any other, I mean, we could have a special meeting, but if we don't wanna have a special meeting, any other things that need to be warned on town meeting, that we need to have them come, and if there's other things, like Village Expansion has said they wanna warn something, they would have to come next week.
Yeah,
Anybody else that we wanna put stuff onto the ballot,
Well, the planning commission.
didn't we already approve putting them on the ballot?
We approved the rural community transportation, but the planning commission, we have the zoning things
oh, right,
are
they're being
working
decided
through a
tonight.
process.
Oh,
They're
that's
having
right.
their public hearing
Yeah.
tonight.
Yeah,
And I listened into the informational hearing Thursday on Zoom, and they were saying that it has to go to the select board next for the select board action. And I'm like, we said no, we thought that
We
it should
gotta
go
put it on
directly to
ballot.
the town. Oh, yeah, we have to
Yeah.
warn the item.
Yeah, so it's
But
our
that's-
decision.
Will phrased it very differently.
It's our decision, again, even though we said this 2 weeks ago, it's our decision as the five of us, once they bring it to us officially, we could pass it. Or we can put it on the ballot.
Yeah,
That's our decision to make.
right,
Yeah,
right. So,
because of changes in state law. It used to always go on the ballot, but now state law allows
Right,
select boards to
right.
make those decisions.
right. So there's that. I mean, there's always a few other. There's, if there's any surplus, there's a boilerplate language about having the funds being used to reduce taxes because the tax rate isn't set until July.
mhm.
Is there any,
The wastewater budget, we need that. We haven't,
that's not. Because wastewater is not, we don't actually supervise that. We put
we
the
have to,
number
we have
in
to
the,
warn it and vote it. The town votes.
they
it.
have to give us an, oh yeah, they have to give us a number to put on the warrant, got it.
Yeah.
Is there any thought we should start, if people can, start a little earlier next week then? That way if we run over, it's. I mean,
It's
we're
not
not
really
running
late.
into like late, yeah, I don't know, it just feels like if there's like a lot. Of things,
Yeah,
I'd
frankly,
rather start at 5 and if we run over, go till 8, then start at 6, and if we run over, go till 9.
Yeah. I
how's your schedule? Cause you're usually the one who's,
Yeah, I would probably be arriving here
Wait.
with Salvia until my partner got home from work. Which, Sal would be playing over there with cars and trucks, and my partner wouldn't be home too late,
Yeah.
would be able to take them eventually. Like soon, wouldn't, yeah, but that's how I would start that meeting.
that's
if it
how
was
you
fi-
would do it, yeah.
If it was
okay.
5 o'clock.
Um, I mean, I'd be fine, and.
I'd be okay
You'd
next
probably
week,
be
next
fine too.
week, yep.
So is it?
It is important we try to get it wrapped up
So
next week.
5 o'clock next week? Is that what's happening?
Okay, let's say 5.
Sense.
Okay,
And Josh, I'll talk to you about getting together,
public service announcement to
maybe Friday.
eat something before arriving.
Hmm.
Don't come
Yeah.
unfed.
Even if you're eating way earlier than usual. Okay,
May I make a motion to adjourn at 8:24 PM?
yes.
Second.
Third.
All those in favor, say aye.
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 Okay.
Best wishes to Patty, who's not here, and to
Thank you.
Graham, who's getting his doctorate.